My fellow Americans, that is the way Franklin D. Roosevelt would begin in an informal conversation with the American people, and so do I. This video is a concise summation of my previous videos, chronologically presented what I have achieved, therefore who I really am. Beginning with the decade of 1940 to 1949, I completed 4 years high school and 3 A's in physics and math. Enlisted in the Air Force Cadets. The use of nuclear energy renewed my interest in being a scientist. I studied and obtained a self-educational degree of expertise in Enrico Fermi's great expertise in nuclear fission. In July 1947, I presented a science paper titled Hydrogen Fusion Energy, an H-bomb, at a secret meeting at the University of Rochester, Secretron Building, Rochester, New York. I insisted A, begin a Super Manhattan Project in Los Alamos, New Mexico. B, especially with H-bombs, all nations now must agree to never use nuclear weapons again. You settle their difference of opinions with diplomacy. Now you have to realize that J. Edgar Hoover he's immoral and incompetent, but he has the power. And I have been saying, there's a baseball term of batting 1,000, meaning I should have the lead. I had, in my opinion, Dewey was a real good man, but I predicted that Truman would win. Now, Hoover, who there was a personality clash, and I'll get to that in a moment, said, well, he's batting 1,000. Now I win. Hoover had, you go in his office, he had to be higher than everybody else. And so there's a secret pyramid of power where Hoover is at the top. And I've tried to talk to senators about replacing him. They actually would shake. The only one who could fire Hoover appears to be the president. Now, most important for Hoover is who's president. Well, supposedly Dewey won. Now I get to where the personality clashes. That is sort of the new star, going to be a party. But as get near the hotel, I don't see any girls. I said, where are the girls? And they said, well, Hoover doesn't have girls. He is queer. He has boys. What? Well, you have your choice of boys. What? I stormed out. Stormed. So now I'm at the highest possible level, but yet there's a paradox between yours truly and that queer Hoover. And it always became more of a paradox and more of a vicious personality clash. In my opinion, we had to replace that moral and professional grounds that Hoover we operated was illegal, and so forth. Now, from 1959, the personality clash is becoming deadly. And I explain. I'm going to fast forward. This J. Edgar Hoover is a liar, immoral, murderous, experiment on Americans to death, criminally insane Hoover. Now, if you realize that Hoover obtained that position, it's appointed. Nobody votes for him. He doesn't obtain it through any way of ability. It's a political plum. It's politics, and he's appointed there. And the reason was this was similar to Watergate, was we call it teapot dome scandal, and he was going to write a report which covered it up, this teapot dome scandal. That's how he got the position. That's one. And two, you research a video by Millie McGee, MC capital Ghee. She's a pass for white, real good school teacher, and she proves she is related to murderous cover-up artist, and he's hypocritically prejudiced J. Edgar Hoover violently, and her grandfather was murdered by her father uncle, who says, yeah, he's a murderer because the grandfather was mentioning that, and I think his name was Hoover, that it was related, and he was a Negro man. So she always then had said that when she was young, couldn't sleep, had nightmares. The fact that how Hoover would kill any of them, let that be known, that true fact. 3, J. Edgar Hoover obtained info about the vet camp. These were World War I vets camping because they were promised a military bonus, and they were out of work and they needed that money, so they camped to obtain this bonus. He obtained who and where, and then Doug rode in there, and they actually killed some of them and injured a lot of them. 4, there was a representative, and he said, we got to replace Hoover. And he's practicing his speech, and when the train pulls into Washington, D.C., the reporters are waiting for him to get off the train. They don't get off the train. They go inside, and they find that he had a speech in his hand, but he dropped dead. What a coincidence. You will see it's absolutely proven, these coincidences, when it comes to Hoover being fired or replaced. 5, Melvin Purvis, the great FBI hero. He was then talked about, well, I think he'd be better than Hoover. Let's get him director. When he publicly said he made a mistake, he says, yeah, I'll become director. Hoover got him out of the FBI right away, and then he was found dead. And Hoover ruled that he had shot himself. And Mrs. Purvis, to Hoover's face, called him a liar and worse, and said that Mr. Purvis would not abandon the family. 7. Well, no, it was 5, 6 is where Homo Hoover experiments Americans to death. He had Nazis over there in intelligence, and especially these Nazi doctors who experimented what they call twin experiments. Now, my brother and I were like twins, and he experimented on I and my brother, and he experimented on my brother to death. That criminally insane Hoover. And others, most of them were black. He experimented, and he experimented on any of those, and then he was a woman hater, and he even experimented. I have at least one woman I saw experimented to death. Absolute truth. And you got where 7 is where, well, I'll go forward to 8. And that is, I'm going by Hoover's office on the way to Bobby Kennedy's office. He's Attorney General. I had over 600 videos going into detail, even one video, 10 to 15 minutes of each of these issues I'm mentioning. I can't find them. I can't get them. I try to. They say, well, you fill out this form, and we'll see about getting the videos. I fill out the form. It keeps coming back. Why? They won't accept the form. So I have to then, I can retape them. Now this is a all-in-one tape, and I'll explain why. And prove, absolutely prove. Now, I tried to get Bobby to investigate my brother's death, and I kept talking louder and more, and then eventually I could hear him on the other side of the wall, and he was evidently, Hoover says don't talk to him because he wouldn't actually talk to me, but he said, well, from what I can understand is that he was talking to somebody, so I could hear that when Jack gets reelected, then Hoover will be replaced. No, you got to investigate now. Fire him now. So, in my opinion, they made a mistake. Now, 9. there was the Reverend Martin Luther King about Kennedy. Oh, and JFK. JFK was murdered. The polite word is assassination. Now I've looked at the films, and see, I had started at the University of Rochester building, right, with the H-bomb. Now I was told to go to the University of Maryland where they have a super atom smasher that I'm going to work on that. And after work, I talked to some of the physicists there about high energy particles. Now, one day they says, hey, instead of being an engineering and construction, I was told to go way to the bottom. I'm at the bottom of the whole area. Anybody could hit me, and if they made a mistake or slip, I'd get killed. About noon, somebody looks over a rail and says they've shot Jack. So you went to Dallas. You have to understand that Johnson lived around the corner from Homo Hoover. Johnson would go over there. They were drinking buddies. He'd go over there at night, sometimes stay overnight. Work together, do things together. Goes to Dallas, Texas. Now, I have various inside eyewitness, and when I look at the films, there's two that you have to, in my opinion, are critical. One is there was a man in the service. Now, this is a man in the service, in the U.S. service, soldier. And he knows guns and rifles. And he hears a rifle over his shoulder coming from up in a grassy knoll. He runs up the grassy knoll. He thought he saw a little white smoke. And he sees a man take a rifle apart and fold it and put it in a rifle case. And when he starts to go up towards the man, a man runs up to him and shows him a badge. He said, he showed me a badge, but I didn't read it. And the man says, I'm taking care of this. He says, you have to leave here. And then he said, yep, you got to leave. And I had to leave right there. And then he is walking with this man who's carrying a rifle case, and in front of them is three men. They're walking towards a freight car. He said, well, now, when I told the government investigators, they told me, don't say a word. You don't say a word about this. Then in a few days, he said, they sent me to Alaska. Now I'm up in Alaska, and if I kind of start to mention it, right away they tell me, look, you're here in Alaska. You don't ever mention this to anybody anytime. Now years have gone by, and he's out of the service. So he's telling the interviewer who's shown him that there's a man in the outline of a man with a rifle. He says, he says, he picked it out, various pictures. He says, that looks like what I saw. And really that outline is of what I saw in the man. And they said, well, you picked out the picture that we have that is at the grassy knoll. So he got real shook-like, and he says, well, then maybe I actually talked to the man that shot President Kennedy. That's that video. I've seen it twice. We don't know what, I saw it, and then within a couple of days, I haven't seen it again. Then there's the one that I've only seen once, although I've seen films where they show the manhole cover. Now, I've been inspecting civil engineering, what they call a drop inlet. It's big enough for a man to stand in there, especially with a silencer rifle. And Kennedy would be coming right at him. Now, in my opinion, Kennedy was hit on the right side. It went to the back and towards the left. That's it appears to me. Now, he'd be coming right at a man with a silencer on a rifle in that manhole who would shoot him, then put the rifle in a rifle case and duck down through the large drain pipe and get out. Yeah, talk about that. They got all kinds of films and books and experts. those are critical in my opinion. And now then there was the attorney in Washington, D.C., and this was before they shot Jack. And I told him my true facts and why I was storming up to Bobby Kennedy's office then. And I told him these true facts, and he said, well, he said, yeah, he says, I'm not doubting you, and I know about this. And he would swear at Hoover. Oh, yeah, I know about it. And he said, I know some things about this, and he'd swear at Hoover that even you don't know. I've been in this town a long time. He says, see all this work I got on my desk? He said, I'll get it done by Friday. Friday, you come in at 5 o'clock, and we'll start on preparing to legally get that. And he'd swear at Hoover. Now, that was on a Monday. On a Wednesday, I called because Hoover's always working more vicious and faster. I want to make sure he's okay and keep the appointment Friday. He doesn't answer. It sounds like I'm his brother. Well, could I speak to him? He says he's dead. Dead? How could it be? He says, I don't know. I talked to him Monday in person. He was in great health and in great spirits. He said, I talked to him yesterday, and he was in great health and great spirits. He says, today, this morning, they tell me he dropped dead, and I have to rush back, and now everything here is a rush confusion. He said, they tell me they're going to bury him Friday. Friday, I attended the service. It was a rainstorm. It can be proven that there was a rainstorm. And yet, all notable Washingtonians were there. It was packed. After everybody left in that rainstorm, I stood there and says, great attorney, someday I'm going to get that just criminally insane Homo Hoover. Someday I'm going to get that criminally insane Homo Hoover. No. Then there's Martin Luther King. I said, no, look, politicians are politicians, but this is a reverend. But Hoover, Martin Luther King had one of the darkest secrets about Pastor White and other dark secrets, and he wanted to get Hoover out. So I had a letter written outline of my true facts, but I didn't have a stamp. I says, tomorrow after work, I'll take and get a stamp and mail it to him with my facts and his public clout and so forth, to get that Hoover out, and I can get my honors and compensation by the Constitution. As I went to get a stamp, I saw a headline, Reverend Martin Luther King shot. What a coincidence. Now we get to Robert Kennedy. And this is fast forward of that decade, but I'll say all of them in chronological order. Now, okay, I'll get to Bobby Kennedy then. Now in 1959-59, there's the personality clash, and that Hoover was political plum cover-up artist. And now we get to where 1960 to 1969. And you have to understand that, in the 1950s, so 1952 to 1955, in order to try to save my brother's life and to get out of that dirty, rotten, he operated illegally, Hooverist way. I can work in mathematical physics is what I should be doing. And so I studied Einstein's opinion day and night for 2 years to the nth degree. I repeat with emphasis. I studied until I obtained a degree of expertise to the nth degree. Knowing what his opinions were and his thinking. And then I tried to confer with him, but I couldn't do that. It was blocked until after about a year. Now Hoover figured, because I'm embarrassing him, saying, I think Einstein would agree with me. Now, he says, Einstein's going to back down to him? He let the phone call go through. because now if who would agree with who, and he figured Einstein went back down to me, and now I couldn't say I'm betting 1,000 that he then is above everybody. So I spoke to him real polite, and I told him I had been studying him, day and night for 2 years. He says, well, have you been doing that much effort? He says, yeah, let's confer. I says, well, I spoke to him real polite. I says, I'd like to suggest, if you please, a modernization is the way I put it, of the, his, it's really Lorentz, but his transformation equation, the relativistic transformation equation. And he said, well, specifically, and I said, well, his was small x prime equals small x minus vt to the square root of 1 minus v squared over little c squared, where little c is what he decreed was the ultimate universal velocity. Well, no one can decree what's the ultimate universal velocity, because you have to, and then there's also the fundamental of Galileo, that v equals d over t. In my opinion, d is space distance, and you can't, it's a void. There's, he said, yeah, well, there's a void. Now he takes this void and warps it. How can you take a void that is, the void is nothing. It's devoid of anything, and you take this nothing and you make it warp and do tricks like. So, and then there's, of course, the, where you have the universal law by Galileo, the addition of component velocities. And he says, well, for light, it's like an exception. I said, well, in my opinion, you take your book of relativity. You will like what? Well, mine would be capital X prime equals capital X minus Vt over the square root of 1 minus V squared over capital C squared. Here, capital C is at least equal to or greater than the velocity of light. And he said, well, that's, real interesting. And he actually said, I'll study it. Please call him and we'll confer same day and time next week. So, okay. And I call and I'm set. And he said, well, this is how we're going to do it. He said, are you sure? And I said, I'm sure. Theoretically, at least I've broken the light barrier. In your day, we wanted to break the sound barrier, and it was, now there's a sound barrier, Mach 1, Mach 2. And theoretically, I'm sure I've broken the light barrier. He said, well, speak to my secretary, and she would answer, and was on the three-way conversation, and she'll take the notes, and when she has it perfectly like you want to tell me, then she's going to talk to me in German, and then I'll confer with you in English. And he would say, but can you speak German? I says, well, especially right now, the only words I can remember is college days of Einschreitschweißer, who's going to buy the beer? And he laughed. And so then that's the way we did it. I spoke to her when she had exactly how I was going to tell it to him in English. Then they would talk in German until he had it precisely in German the way I would, my forward, modernization, etc. And then he would speak to me in English. But now he knew I was Italian, he said. And now I can say he never said, well, we're speaking Italian, because he could speak Italian fluently. He went to school in Italy. And they had a group of Michael Basso, who was Olinto Di Pietro's cousin, and and Olinto Di Pietro's brother. And Einstein, they had a little group of what's new and interesting in science. So Olinto Di Pietro really put forward equals to MC squared 2 years before Einstein. Now they get to the point where he says, well, yeah, but they tell me not to work with you. I says, what, that kind of thing? And he says, well, they have told me that I can't work with you. And I said, well, in my opinion, the secret police can't tell scientists if they can work in science and when and what and with who. If we have proposals that are in the discipline of science and we want to put them forward, I think we have the right to try. And to my surprise, he says, you're right. You're absolutely right. He says, now get to specifics. And I says, well, specifically, if you took your book of relativity and you put it on a point of a fulcrum, and you hit it with one of your photons, Compton proved that it has sufficient momentum, it would make your book of relativity fall. Now you take and put it back on a point of the fulcrum, and it falls. And you put it back up on a point of fulcrum again, and it falls. And you can't detect anything. That's because my M prime is always, I have a finite particle theory, and I explained that this finite particle theory is always going towards the infinitesimal particle, which at the infinitesimal point is the fundamental universal building block towards a unified field theory. And so my rho prime in future years, they will prove that my rho prime equals your rho. So my rho prime equals m prime v prime r, and your rho equals m v r. We set r to unity. Then when my rho prime is proven to equal your rho, but my m prime being less than your m, therefore my v prime has to be greater than your v. So I'm sure that I've broken the light barrier. And he said, you're right. And then to my surprise, in a real, almost nasty way, he says, I don't care what they tell me. He says, you're absolutely right. You call me, we're going to begin working together. I says, yeah. I says, well, Dr. Einstein, in my opinion, with my boldness and your great expertise in mathematical physics, I think maybe we can get together in a valid unified field theory. And he says, you call me the same day and time next week, we're going to begin working together. Well, thank you, Dr. Einstein. Now, what happened to Dr. Einstein? Within days, he dropped dead. So now Hoover blocked anything, and he murders my brother, and I'm actually a prisoner of the power of this tyrant, criminally insane Hoover. Now, we have then where in the 1960s, in 1956, 1957, we needed, I thought, instantaneous copier. So I used to work for East Dakota Experimental Development Lab. I did the original science and invention of Xerox, Xerox. I have 2,000 videos that I can't get now. Dot the I's and cross the T's. I did the original work of the Xerox for electric copier. That's why in Rochester, New York, and I pointed in the empty building of Haloid, because they had gone bankrupt and moved out of Rochester and started in Haloid. So I was Haloid Xerox, and the British intelligence used to work with Hoover and experimenting with the Nazis. So they became rank Xerox for money in England and Haloid Xerox here. Absolute true fact. Now you put this on a voice stress analyzer, it'll prove I'm saying the truth. Or I'll take a polygraph test, lie detector test on any editor's desk, and I'll pay for it. But you must print the results. Now we get to you see, I wanted to do it my way, and they says, no, we got Von Braun. I said, well, Von Braun's a Nazi. Well, he's here now. Yeah, but I'm not going to work with a Nazi. Hoover had the excuses, you're out. See, before there was this pyramid of power, and Hoover was at the top of the pyramid. I was on the inside, but yet he had me on the outside, and I'd circle around this point, and whatever came up, I would analyze and suggest. And when I predicted that Truman would win, he says, now Dewey will win. So he can't say he's batting 1,000. I am perfect. Huh? He had to be above everybody else. So they had one of Hoover's parties, and I was alone. And because Hoover, he was even a womanator. So but the next day, when Truman won, he blamed his experts around him. He says, you let me lose to him. he says, I give you all the top money, and now he had to for sure kowtow to me. And so he said, well, I'll see what his opinion is first. If he makes a mistake, as I noticed, some would drop and they wouldn't return, especially if he didn't like someone. Appears went over a season and come back. So he had me in a position where, if he wanted to, could kill me. So, in fact, through the years, I have barely survived at least 6 accidents. Some of them by a split second. Bullet going by me. Where I would have fell at least 40 feet and sometimes slip and fall on rebars and get spiked and killed, and rebars fall into. Now, so I took and said, well, I have to go forward. And I did many things in many disciplines: science, philosophy, cosmology, history, psychology, intelligence, crime, military science, political science. It's political science, but it's called dirty politics by most for obvious reasons. And so that's the way we progressed. Now, we are where I put forward light application stimulated electromagnetic radiation. I'll repeat it again with emphasis. Light application stimulated by ruby crystal, light application stimulated electromagnetic radiation. My laser futuristic multi-purpose coherent beam. Because, that's where I was saying is that the Von Braun and the Russians beat them. And they did it the way I was going to do it. What a coincidence. So now they came to me with almost like tears in their eyes. Well, we murdered your brother, double cross on a patriotic basis. All right, well, let me see what I can do. Day and night, put forward light application stimulated electromagnetic radiation, optical pumping. It's my original work. You mealy-mouthed, prejudiced, cover-up, lying bums. I challenge you. You. Challenge you to polygraph lie detector test. I'll pay for it. Any editor's desk. They don't dare. The great heroes of the art of telling the public, because we're a free country, what the true facts. The members of, the Fourth Estate, and so forth. Oh, cowards. Cover up. Don't dare. One of them was recognized as one of the great heroes in this country, and I wouldn't even dare answer me. Because if they answered, then they would admit that they got it. And why didn't they answer or take my challenge? Take a polygraph, lie detector test on your desk, but you must print the results. You dirty, cover-up, phony bums. I tell the truth. And now we get to where I put forward all of this great achievements, world-class achievements. And that I'm a religious man. And I wanted to be a priest. And said, you can't because you're married. St. Peter was married. So were some of the other apostles and disciples and early founders of the church. Well, you can't. That's the ruling of Rome. Well, then, in my opinion, if St. Peter was married and he was actually the rock that Jesus built his church on, then I think you can be married. So I have then what I call pure Christians. Not that I'm purer than anyone else. I take a pure comprehension and presentation of Christ's real purpose here on earth. And it wasn't to get murdered so you could believe there was a just God and in him. That would be kind of a crime, wouldn't it? He came here and be murdered so you can believe there's a just God. No, he came here to prove divinity. He was murdered because they murdered him. Murder is a crime. Not that he committed suicide as a mortal sin. He didn't commit suicide. He didn't kill himself. He was put to death by those who didn't want him to be the leader. They wanted a military leader, not a leader people would follow. So he was. So therefore, that's my opinion, the true how I put it forward. I don't believe in this atonement. I believe in doing what's best, and I'll get to that in a moment. So it came where I was defending and argue with the top evolutionists, and I'd say, well, they say, where? And they say, well, 20 million years ago, we were all the same. I says, are you trying to tell me that 20 million years ago, man and the jackass were one and the same? Oh, no, yeah. I says, well, it appears to me that nowadays, a jackass is a jackass, and doesn't become a man, but I see some men that kind of talk and act like a jackass. So they banned me. They got me off of the internet, getting lawyers and so forth. So they called me preacher. So I said, well, all right, I'm Preacher Doc. My legal professional name is Doc Castellano. Okay, I'm Preacher Doc. I'm defending Christians that they got national groups that attack them. Yeah, they have national groups take quarter of each part of the country and they attack. They say they can do it. They got the right to get on your in your field. If you get in theirs, they sue you because they don't want a believer to be on their internet. Well, then I take and I say, well, now I have this because I would say, put me for a internet candidate. Now they say they're going to have a real internet candidate to appear on a ballot is what they want to do. Well, that's what I've been trying to do. And I say, I think I'm the best. You should put me on this ballot because if I am the public leader of the U.S., in 1 year I'd have this country corrected because you have to understand this country has lost. It has lost because of the King George, Queen Hoover tyranny. Killing especially of JFK Jr. And they put Bush Sr. in Dallas at the time, and you Google Millie McGee, and you Google heirs of Einstein, and you Google Bush and Dallas and so forth, and you see what you get. So I'm now saying I should be the candidate, and my Universal Pure Christians, Preacher Doc, and man's great challenge is, why are we here? How did we get here? What best to do? And I want to go with those videos. And I say to all of you who, of course, believe these true facts and support my claim of constitutional rights of honors and compensation, I say, of course, for you and all of us, thank you.